you I would repeal and replace Obamacare, I'm keeping my promise, and the best thing about this program is I'm taking money and power out of Washington, bringing it home, and if you don't like what's going on in your health care life, you don't have to complain to a bureaucrat who could care less about you. You can complain to your state house member, to your governor, who needs your vote, and they will listen to you.
Oh, that is South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. He is desperate to get the votes necessary to pass. He's the co-sponsor of the Senate Republican bill when it comes to repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. But as a lot of people said that they were moving forward with that they were very close to getting the 50 votes needed. And of course, Vice President Mike Pence would break the tiebreaker. But major opposition continues to build against this particular bill. We also have Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He plans on holding a vote on this bill next week, but so far Republicans don't have those 50 votes. On yesterday, big news, all 50 state directors of Medicaid came out as a collective against this proposal. Also, a number of other organizations. You have hospital associations, you have healthcare organizations, a number of entities saying this is a bad bill. Republicans also want to consider this bill, to be considered with virtually no debate. And so the pressure continues. Folks have been flooding Capitol Hill with phone numbers, 202-224-3121. They're calling that number, letting Republicans know how they feel about this bill. You might remember the last bill the Senate considered, you only had 12 to 14% of African Americans, 12 to 40% of Americans who even supported this bill. Even Republicans were against this bill as well. So let's break this thing down, of course, with one of our experts here. You've seen him on the show before. Joining us, Danielle Dawes, author of the book 150 Years of Obamacare. He joins us right now. Also on our panel, Robert Patillo, attorney and CBS radio personality in Atlanta. Amber J. Phillips, co-host of Black Joy Mixtape podcast. Yodita Welday, a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Daniel, when you see what's going on here, the fact that you have 50 state Medicaid directors who are against this, that says a whole lot. I saw one tweet this morning. They say you can never get those 50 to agree on anything.
Absolutely. It just keeps getting from better to worse, right? And it just keeps getting worse and worse. And what they don't accept is the fact that a trial and error approach to health reform does not work. What is essentially happening is they're taking a play out of Frankenstein's book, right? Where they're creating their own monster. They're taking past proposals, failed proposals that have been deemed to create utter destruction in the healthcare market, and putting them together to create what will ultimately become this huge monster. And I think the entire healthcare sector recognizes that if they do not push back against those attempts, they will unravel the market way more so than past proposals would have done.
And when you look at this proposal, again, they're claiming it does protect those with pre-existing conditions. But the reality is the current law gives you blanket coverage across the country. This proposal will say to the states, it's up to you.
That's right. So, you know, Senator Cassidy will argue that no, we are protecting those with pre-existing conditions. That's true on paper, but we know in fact, when it is implemented, the states have the ability to charge you based on your medical history, whereas the ACA does not. There's a ban on charging you based on your medical history. They would also be allowed to go beyond that by saying, if you are of this age, we're going to also increase the price to you. So if you are sick, if you are poor, and if you're older, you should be extremely afraid of what is in this bill.
What's also interesting, they don't want any debate whatsoever. Right. Nothing. They want no debate at all, which is a good indication there's a problem with the bill.
That's exactly right. And it's so interesting when you talk about process. So I know Senator Graham actually had criticized the process in a tweet a few months ago. We know Senator McCain has criticized the process as well, right? And yet, what do we see happening? It's the same thing. It's just rhetoric. And so we hope then that after this debacle, they will come together and move forward with a bipartisan approach.
What else do you see in this bill that is bad news?
Well, I think what we see happening right now is they are clawing back all of the funds from programs that were created under the Affordable Care Act. So when you talk about Medicaid expansion, the health insurance exchanges, the subsidies for those, They're clawing back that, putting it in a block grant, and essentially giving it to the states, right? And it's not giving it to all states. What they're doing is they're giving it to the states. They're rewarding the states that had refused to implement the Affordable Care Act, refused to expand Medicaid. But for these states, Georgia, Texas, mostly southern states, it would be a short-term victory, because if they were to take the money under the Affordable Care Act, even right now, those funds would be substantially more. Under the ACA, or under this Graham-Cassidy bill, states would lose over $235 billion with a B. And that's just for Medicaid expansion. Then you're talking about another $175 billion for traditional Medicaid, for the regular Medicaid program. So I think, you know, folks need to recognize that, yeah, even if your state is getting a boost in funding, that's short term, because in the long term, it's going to even be more devastating in terms of the loss of funding to your state.
Daniel Dawes, we really appreciate it. Again, your book, 150 Years of Obamacare. Thank you so very much. Folks, again, you have a couple of senators who are critical. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska. You have John McCain of Arizona. They have not signaled whether they actually support this. Also, a deal has been cut that will essentially allow Alaska to keep the Affordable Care Act, but not everybody else. So you remember when they were critical of the Cornhusker deal and others when it came to the Affordable Care Act when President Obama was there? Now they are desperate to cut deals with other senators in order to actually pass this bill, send it over to the House, and have Trump sign it, because they're desperate to simply do one thing, that is repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. Yesterday, Donald Trump had this to say about this plan.
I think it has a very good chance. There's tremendous support from Republicans. Certainly, we're at 47 or 48 already senators, and a lot of others are looking at it very positively.
Again, that was Trump on yesterday, but again, they still do not have the votes for it actually to take place. So I want to break this thing down with our panel, but also, again, Trump, of course, is getting a boost with his approval ratings. He hopes this actually increases it as well. Robert, here's what's interesting about this. Again, they don't want any debate whatsoever, and they tried to sneak it in the first few days of this week. But as each day has progressed, the pressure has gotten higher and higher.
Well, what we have seen is that the Republican majority in the Senate is not an actual majority. They've campaigned for 7 years in 4 different election cycles on making sure that they could pass a repeal and replacement to the ACA. In reality, what they did was never create a concrete plan that they knew could get passed. They've gone through, I think this is the 3rd version of health care reform that Republicans have tried to pass, knowing good and well this is not what the American people want. This is not what they promised in the campaign trail, and this is in no way going to fix the problems of Obamacare. Obamacare is a broken system. President Obama has admitted that himself. However, the way to fix it isn't to break it up into 50 broken systems.
But here's the deal, Amber. This is because you called it Obamacare. I still say that was one of the problems. One of the biggest mistakes Democrats made and supporters by calling it Obamacare, because that's why they hate it. Again, the people in these red states, the people who support Donald Trump, they like the Affordable Care Act. They hate Obamacare. It's the same thing. So really, they hate Obama, and this effort to repeal this is to replace his signature legislation.
It didn't matter if they called it the bill to save American lives. Anything Barack Obama touched during his presidency was attacked, especially now. I think what we need to focus on is there has been so much pushback from the Democrats to paint Obamacare as if it is perfect, when the entire time we should have been improving upon the model. We should have been working up and addressing some of the mistakes and make it even more impactful for the communities that are using Obamacare to save their lives. We're going to talk about this a little bit more, but infant mortality rates are high, maternal mortality rates are high, and this health care addresses those issues specifically for marginalized communities and Black women.
Ludie?
This whole thing is just like there are going to be so many legal issues with this bill. There are going to be so many different lawsuits that are going to be started across this country with people arguing that block grants aren't being distributed. It's just going to be a free-for-all, and we're going to be seeing litigation because of this bill all across this country. There's just going to be monumental issues with this bill, and I don't understand why they're willing to risk that because of a name, like you mentioned earlier.
I mean, again, when you see Jimmy Kimmel has done this, other people have done this, it's repeated. You ask them about the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
Oh, love it. I mean,
it.
they've been at rallies saying, I mean, don't touch my Affordable Care Act, but you get rid of that Obamacare.
Same thing.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
White folks in this country have always voted against their best interests, though, no matter how it's painted. They are resistant to any kind of change or real legislation. We know this with even putting Trump in office. People are voting against their health care. They're voting against their clean air. They're voting against their clean water. Texas is voting against infrastructure for hurricanes.
So I mentioned Jimmy Kimmel, of course, a couple of nights ago. He did a commentary where he really went after the principles of this particular bill, and he got some criticism from Fox and Friends, Brian Kilmeade, and man, did he destroy him, call him the biggest butt kisser in Hollywood. And so he is fired back again because people have been saying, oh, Jimmy Kimmel, he should stick to jokes. But you got a reality star who's the president, but you're telling Jimmy Kimmel just to stick to jokes. Here's Kimmel with his latest response.
He made a total about face, which means he either doesn't understand his own bill or he lied to me. It's as simple as that.
All right, that was Jimmy Kimmel from the first night. Okay, we played that several times already, and so I'm gonna pull up a second again what he said last night. Angela Rye, who's principal and CEO Impact Strategies. Angela, look, you spent lots of time on the Hill as well. This has nothing to do with the lives of people. This is all about get rid of this piece of legislation because it's about President Obama.
Yeah, we saw with the 60-plus first repeal attempts that it wasn't about protecting the lives of human beings and ensuring access to affordable care. We also know that for whatever reason, and Amber, you were just talking about this, people voting against their own interests. Some people have gotten to the point where they think that healthcare is a privilege for the few instead of a right for every American. Folks that pay their taxes, folks who are just trying to make ends meet, folks who are taking care of their kids, folks who are, just trying to survive. If this country is really about life, liberty, but let's start with just life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And of course, reasonable minds, especially on this panel, can disagree whether or not that promise has been made true for our community. Life. Let's just start there. And this should be something that's not partisan. But of course, again, anything that had Barack Obama's name attached to it was going to be a challenge. I think this current president, has made it clear that repealing everything about Barack Obama's legacy is his top priority.
I had to laugh also because Media Matters put out this item with this. Fox News says Jimmy Kimmel isn't qualified to talk politics, and then they put together this entire video of all these conservative celebrities talking politics on Fox News. And again, I think what they're afraid of, his followers, his supporters have been blowing up Capitol Hill, and this is what I think people need to understand. If you're sitting at home right now, watching this newscast, and you're just going, oh, it's a doggone shame what they're doing, and you haven't picked the phone up, you're part of the damn problem. And because one of the problems that took place when President Obama was in office, when this bill was being debated, there were too many people who sat their butts at home on their couches and at town halls in the districts of Congressional Black Caucus members. You had folks who did not look like them who were at the town hall, and the folks who made the most noise were those who were against it. And that's one of the reasons why you had so much pressure, because the people who said we need this, they said, oh, we'll leave it up to somebody else. No, if you believe in this and it's made a difference in your life, you got to pick up that phone and not just talk about it inside your house.
Well, I think one of the things we have to remember is that states that have Republican senators that are supporting the Graham-Cassidy bill include cities like New Orleans, Atlanta, Charlotte, Philadelphia. So we have power to actually address these issues. We have the political strength to address these issues. We just have to flex that muscle. And we have to start being honest about what Obamacare is and what Obamacare isn't. Obamacare is not universal health care. Obamacare is not the health care plan that Obama campaigned on in 2008.
The mistake by calling Obamacare. I'm trying to tell you.
ACA
is branded.
Yeah, but you're furthering the negative.
But it shouldn't be negative because that was the president who signed that bill into office. It's not our fault that people are dumb and they don't understand. I'm serious.
You're right.
The fact that it's Affordable Care Act, that wasn't our branding, by the way. That was Republican branding that stuck because it's shorter than saying affordable.
Oh, no.
Care.
I know that. No, they're very good at bumper sticker messages. senators. Again, folks, the phone number to call is 202-224-3121. 202-224-3121. If you live in certain, so let's say you live in Alabama, don't call Congresswoman Terry Sewell. She's in the House. You should be calling the 2 Republican United States senators, because that's the problem. And so a lot of people, what happens is, and we saw this, I saw this just yesterday at Congressional Black Caucus, folks were saying, well, what are some of the bills the CBC is proposing in the Senate? And I'm going, okay, there are 2. There's Senator Kamala Harris, there's Senator Cory Booker, and then you have Senator Tim Scott on the Republican side, who's not in the Congressional Black Caucus. And so a lot of people want to call their House member. No, you should be calling members of the U.S. Senate.
But you know what? For staffers who are watching this program, please just transfer the call.
Right.
No, I'm serious, because if 202-224-3121 is the Capitol operator switchboard, that means when the phone rings, you can transfer it to the senator who's going to be voting. I'm just saying. Former staffer.
Just education.
Transfer.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.